Hello, my name is Morgan Baker, and I'm an Accessibility Development Director at Electronic Arts. Today's talk is titled Behind the Scenes EA's Accessibility Program. What I'll cover today is a high-level overview of the program, how it works in practice, examples of services we provide, ideals and lessons learned along the way, which I'll have woven into this presentation, as well as I'll wrap up with the key takeaways, a TLDR if you didn't have a chance to watch this whole thing. I'll also be monitoring the Discord channel for any questions. Two quick disclaimers for you. I won't be discussing compliance, and I've adjusted naming conventions and stripped out EA-specific lingo, and this is not for NDA purposes, but to make this talk a bit more approachable and relatable. Every company has their own unique terms. To get started then, I'm going to share a little bit about my own path to Electronic Arts. So I've been at Electronic Arts now for about 3.5 years. My career in accessibility began actually in education. Here I earned a master's degree and I worked as a specialist in post-secondary contexts. While I was living in Los Angeles, I would write and stream about my experience as someone who is completely deaf and has disabilities as well. Accessibility was and still is something I rely on hour to hour, day to day, week to week, every moment of my life. And so this is how I kind of fell into the field in the first place. As it turns out, developers were listening, and private messages led to studio invites, which led to contract work and full-time consultations. And I realized I was working two full-time jobs at that point. So I made the leap and became a game designer where I built design and implementation skills, as well as I gained an understanding of resourcing and technical leads, which are skills I still use today. I eventually joined EA as they were seeking a lead for accessibility to help out, and thanks to Tulai McNally, I joined the company a few years ago. And since I've joined, I've had the opportunity to support many titles like Dragon Age, Dead Space, Jedi Survivor, and multiple EA Sports franchises. So where am I right now in this organization? So I live in a player experience team, and I'm now serving as the Accessibility Development Director, which, yes, ADD, allow the jokes to commence. If you know, you know. I'm grateful to continue this work, supporting teams and players all across EA. With that background then, let's talk a little bit about the program itself. So, I want to share insights from my journey with this program. I'm going to give you a top-down view of how our program works for folks who are either building or running their own programs, or maybe for like players and consultants who are curious about the quote, how the magic happens, I guess. So another important note for you though, before I even delve into anything about what we do at EA, I want to make sure it's very clear that there is no single right way to run an accessibility program, especially in the context of games. Do what makes sense for your company. Find a common ground with the people you support. And some changes may be necessary, but you have to use your best judgment to decide where to push. For EA and for the context of how we work, the mission that helps drive us is delivering actionable insights so game teams can incorporate accessibility early and often. Think of my program as essentially Insights org that provides guidance and support. So the team then itself sits under operations, and this is home to many central functions for player experience orgs such as like user experience, player sentiment, certification, compliance, and me. Accessibility fits naturally here, as you can imagine, because things like UXR and sentiment and compliance testing is all very connected to it. I do want to point out a little bit about the program history, though. EA Accessibility has existed long before I've joined the company, and this is thanks to advocates and professionals like Karen Stevens, James Berg, and Ashley Hobbs, to name a few. Over time, the program evolved and moved into a sub-org called Signature Player Experience, and for context for you, that's essentially an organization that has a lot of different domains. So accessibility is one, PC experience is like another. And that's when I joined. I moved over there and helped level up to where we are now. The program purpose then, as you can see, is to provide actionable insights to game teams, and the goal is to integrate accessibility early and often in development. However, the program also contributes to larger initiatives. For example, the AGI tagging system ran by the ESA, as well as the Accessibility Patent Pledge, which is ran by EA's Global Affairs Department, which is like legal, and of course others as well. However, my program focuses primarily, as much as possible, on gaming software. Occasionally, just by the nature of accessibility, we'll collaborate with like EAIT, EA App, websites, but most of our resources go into games right now. As many folks may know, that's already a huge scope for a lean and mean team, especially we have dozens of projects constantly in development. Now that you see where the program sits, let's talk a little bit about the team itself. So you have myself. I am Director Lead Hello, and then I'm joined by 3 talented accessibility specialists. Each manages a portfolio of titles. They support with many core responsibilities, including evaluating titles, adjusting the quality findings of them, listening to players, gathering sentiment, creating design reviews, supporting workshops, and overall, to generalize, what they do is deliver actionable insights tailored to each team and product. We lean into each other's strengths to provide the best possible support. Although outside of this management for portfolio, I do encourage the specialists to own different parts of the program. So I'll say, like, for example, Andrew is our standard shepherd for everything quality. We have Bob, who is our all things tags guys and mobile accessibility. And we have Luke, who is a liaison for our tools and tech team, and many more other areas of influence. How we work with teams then is that our team, we do not dictate design or tell teams what to do. Developers are the experts of their games, and our role is to bring insights and design ideas through an accessibility lens. Sometimes we'll have a reality check though, and I have to be honest, where sometimes we'll have a game team that's like, please just tell me what to do. And that's especially prominent during like busier times in production. And of course we adapt accordingly. But while pictured here is 4 people, this work is grounded in the contributions of many, many across electronic arts. For example, we have Rob Cook, who is the one who innovated and brought forth what exists today as the EA accessibility standards. Without him, this program would not exist. We have Suzanne, Jess, you, and Russell, who were pivotal in workshops from a user research perspective. We have Kate Kellogg, who champions accessibility at the most executive level. And we have testers and quality designers who support like accessibility and perform testing literally on a daily basis. We have Rob McBroom, who advocates for accessible websites. We have Nat, who's pushing for accessibility in EAIT. We have Cara and Blanca, the creators of Fontic and Iris. And that's just to name a few central orgs. You can only imagine for studios how much more they even contribute to this. And this gives you the first key takeaway of this talk, which it takes a village to make games accessible. Accessibility cannot be done by one person. Trying to do so will lead to burnout and limit impact. In fact, we have a philosophy in our program. We don't see ourselves as a central ruler. Instead, we view ourselves as a support system for product teams. We listen, we provide actionable insights, and ultimately help teams so they can make informed decisions based off of their own context. This is not about a power thing. This isn't a rulership, a dictatorship, an ownership. We are one team across EA working together to champion accessibility, which actually EA has a thing that's like #1team, which we definitely lean into. In fact, language matters, and I remember this is something David Tisserand talked about in his own talk, and something we adopted as well, where our core team tends to avoid things like I, me, you, your. Instead, we use we and our. So the implication here being this isn't me, my stuff. This isn't you, your stuff. This is us. This is for our work. This is for our players. And it truly takes everyone to make a game accessible. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how we work with teams then. So, when we engage, we make contact with a game project very early in production. This is typically to translate for everyone, like feature planning or pre production. Sometimes it can be earlier depending on the product, and that's a lot of fun for us. The first steps is we outline the services we can offer. Then we have an interactive discussion with the team and our team to decide together what makes the most sense for this product and where it is at the moment and its goals. There's different ways teams will engage with us. Some will want to start out with an accessible design workshop, but others may only have the bandwidth to do standard testing. And I've seen some arrive with fully outlined accessibility plans already in place, including KPIs and goals. In fact, this is your next key takeaway. A wise man once said, "Trust is hard to gain, but easy to lose." That wise man was David Tisserand. And why I bring this up is because accessibility in games requires constant trust and a partnership. Remember how I mentioned earlier, we're not a policing role. This is a collaboration in how we will insert ourselves to help make the product most accessible as possible. This is not some sort of dictatorship or like central me team. So we sometimes will have to dispel the compliance myth. So it's an easy assumption when we first engage with the game team, they may assume accessibility team is compliance team. And that's not really true. We're here to support all areas of game development and not just check a box. So the one way we try to build trust, for example, is we never leave a question unanswered, even if the answer has to be, "I don't know, let's find out together." We also make sure to manage expectations accordingly, especially when we're engaging with game teams early. Some teams may assume we have an infinite amount of resources or we can handle implementation, and that is not the case. Although the Respawn director keeps subtly threatening me that he's going to toss me an engine one day. Please don't do it. It's a slippery slope. But it's important to clarify what we can and we cannot do for the game teams. However, I will often ask me personally as the director when working with these game teams if they have anything, needs or questions or concerns outside the current boundaries. This helps us build business cases for future resources and tools. Like an example is the workshops where we constantly got the request, we want to work more with players. But overall for this, it involves empathy and understanding, listening to the game team's needs, not just what we think they need. But trust grows when game teams feel heard and fully supported. So then let's talk a little bit about how we work with the game teams and examples of services. So I've broken this up into 4 simple sections. EA, we have our own lingo and our own, we have fancy frameworks and stuff like that. But really, you could just boil it down to 4 little areas here. So, for example, we have workshops, which is a first touch point for many of our game teams. This is where they will meet with advisors who are player consultants and experts and gives the game team an opportunity to build empathy and gain context, with the ultimate goal of these workshops is to understand the game team's needs and leave with clear action items to help best support our players. For example, FC has had, I've lost count of how many workshops at this point. From there, we have road mapping, where we'll work with teams to set targets and priorities. Context for you. So we have something called the EA Accessibility Standards, which is a list of things that we can objectively measure in a game to tell if it's meeting or exceeding player expectations. So for example, does the game have subtitles and are they actually good? Things that can be very simply measured in this way. And so one thing that teams will do is we'll target set with them using these standards, and then they will use those targets to inform design throughout production. We'll also, too, in terms of road mapping, provide benchmarking and market analyses. So providing standards data for other similar titles. So an example would be Madden would like to see what FC is performing and doing to help make sure that they're meeting the company expectations. We'll also generally help identify what success looks like for that specific title. So this is outside the standards, because standards is things that you can look at for like any game versus going outside of the box. So like an example would be if a game has a particular risk for motor or vision, we'll dig deeper into the design to provide actionable insights on how this could be approached for that title. This then leads into the full production aspect where we're constantly providing insights. This includes like design reviews, mini workshops, standards testing where we'll do like cycle testing, and general just research and consultation. So these insights are always tailored and contextual to the game team and what they're working on at the moment. So an example will be like a design review for FC26 high contrast mode to help determine if contrast is enough. An example of a mini workshop would be like with Dead Space to help understand how to implement innovative designs for cognition. And an example of like a test run would be like doing a run for Dragon Age based off of their targets and the list of standards so that they can better understand if they're meeting baseline subtitle goals. Not only do they exist, but are they meeting industry expectations for size, color, and font? From there we have the last category, which is validation. This is the final stage and tends to be towards the end of production and sometimes rolls into post-launch. And this is ensuring that commitments translate into the finished product. So we'll do things like tags validation, final status reports, and release watches, which I'll explain what those are. But like an example would be like testing for the Steam, PlayStation, and Xbox storefronts to determine if the tags are meeting expectations. Another example is like, let's say, a final test run of the standards for NHL, so the game team can see and the company can know if they're meeting standards, and it'll help inform us for future installments. We also have an example of like a release watch, which this is essentially a player sentiment report. An example of one that we've done was like for Jedi Survivor to help inform their high contrast mode patch that came in within a year of launch. However, I do want to point out to you, this is a lot of information, and I feel like if you're probably watching the recording of this, you're probably pausing a lot, and that's good. It's okay. But I do want to point out to you that this isn't a linear pipeline. Teams can enter at different stages depending on needs, and teams may pick and choose. Some things will always happen though, like the validation phase will always happen, but maybe some teams want a target set, or maybe some teams want to just do workshops. We always work with them. I do want to note though that all this is executed by our specialists on our team who leverage internal resources and relationships to get this work done. Don't worry, no, I don't leave them alone. They have myself, and we have like user research and lots of other teams that we partner with to get all these data. Some people may think that a specialist is saying like, what is wrong with the game, picking up the software? And I like to joke that's probably actually the easiest part of accessibility. What is hard is providing clear action, balancing game team priorities and needs, managing stakeholders, and adapting quickly to different asks or sudden production changes. In fact, this is kind of a key point in your next takeaway here, which is engagement is flexible and contextual. Not every team needs or wants the same support, and that's okay. In fact, your takeaway here is no two games are made the same. The core principle is adapt accordingly. You have to embrace this adaptability and flexibility, especially since every team is different. They have different resources, experiences, constraints, maturity levels. A one size does not fit all that we can do. You need to have different strategies. In fact, recently I was doing like an onboarding with a few new folks over in our department. And they're like, do we have like a framework or like a standardized way? And I'm like, yes, but it's just that. It's just a framework. They're meant to be guidelines for how we engage with folks. Like an example for you is we have like sports titles versus action RPGs. These are practically different worlds in terms of production. What works for one doesn't translate to the other. There are some consistent things though, like early involvement is far more effective than retrofitting. But we do have the reality check of sometimes you have to jump in when you jump in and make it work. So like, for example, some teams are too far along to do a workshop, but have plenty of time to do some target setting and receive validation. It is honestly a balancing act. Where making games accessible, you have to balance ideal accessibility goals with practical timelines and constraints of the product's development. Now, with all this in mind, I want to take a quick look with you at a specific and very recent service that we executed. So we have here, and I'm reading straight from the slide now, is workshops. Accessible design workshops exist to help game teams elevate their understanding of accessibility, as well as develop very early action items for them to use throughout production to ensure the game is as accessible as possible. So a very recent example, and FC26 actually has its own talk. They'll give way more depth, so I'm just giving the TLDR highlight, go watch their talk. But we have the FC26 game team where we had game devs interview accessible design advisors, and these are player consultants who are experts of their experience and accessibility. And this helped learn, build empathy, and gather actionable insights contextual to that specific game. Not just general advice like subtitle good, which, gosh, I could say that, but talking very specifically about what barriers exist in FC that causes frustration and, friction for them. From there, we have a synthesize moment where we'll look at the insights and ideas. So the game devs will translate the insights into game-specific themes and concepts. Then devs will practice incorporating those insights through ideation activities where we encourage folks to shoot for the moon and think as much as possible on how we can elevate this entire product. And after the workshop from there, we do continuous follow-up where the game devs will follow up on the insights and we provide specialist support accordingly, which you can see pictured here. There was a town hall where they're showcasing their high contrast mode and a very, very early iteration of said high contrast mode. In fact, this kind of goes into my next and last key takeaway for you, which accessibility in games requires nothing about us without us. Meaning, and this is a expression, that players with lived experiences must be part of the process and product development. In the past year, we have welcomed over a dozen accessibility consultants. And as I mentioned, these are player experts from our community, and they directly contributed to things like I showed you workshops, but we also had like deeper design conversations. Their perspective brings authenticity and relevance that we can't create alone. We are also constantly gathering player sentiment through our launch reports, which I mentioned earlier. Yes, we are reading. Yes, we are watching. Please keep talking more about our games because honestly, without your feedback, many high impact features would not exist today. Examples for FC and impact, we had like Victor Bronco, Wobbly Gamer, we have Dan Bellis who joined us, and James Toland. And outside of FC, we have plenty of gamers and like players. I'm trying to think, like we had Steve Saylor, Jay Justice, Chris Robinson, Ross Miner, just to name a few off the top of my head. We've had a lot of folks and probably dozens of contracts just within the past year with them, but at least over a dozen accessibility consultants. So we're busy over here. But in this case, for the example of FC26, we invited these 4 folks to come in and do workshops. And the direct result, which I showed earlier, was a high contrast mode, stadium shadows options, also known as the Victor option, and a pitch contrast slider. Why this all matters is our services and reviews are important for my program, but they can never fully replace lived experiences. Community input makes features usable, meaningful, and grounded, and helps us understand feature value too, answering the question, do people actually need this? And the answer is yes, please. So looking forward for our program as we continue to grow, we are, in many ways, I say, just getting started. And one thing I would love to do more, and our team is very aligned on, is expanding so we have more involvement with the players, whether it be through more of these workshops, more consistent play testing, and just anything we can do to ensure more direct involvement throughout development cycles, with the ultimate goal of not just reviewing accessibility, but co-creating and co-designing alongside the community. Accessibility then is a journey, and it's not something that we can be solved overnight. Hence why I say it feels like it's only just the beginning for us over here. We have examples of impact over the couple years that I've been over at EA. So, for example, FC26 with a high contrast mode, F1 with audio assist, Battlefield 6 with tinnitus relief filters. We have Dragon Age with highlighted options, Dead Space with expanded settings, and Jedi Survivor launching a post patch for high contrast modes. And not pictured here is the tools that we've created, including text size and contrast checker, Fontic, spelled Fontttik. And then we also have Iris, which is a photosensitivity testing tool. Both of these were built inside of EA and then outsourced to the industry, which kind of shows you a little bit of our philosophy that we're not here to just improve our games, but we want just all players to be able to play all games, and so we're happy to contribute in the ways that we can. The key takeaway for this then is accessibility is an ongoing journey, and it's important to celebrate every single win, no matter the size. Every feature, tool, improvement is worth celebrating progress because it all adds up. I always say that if we can open the door for one more player, that's enough for me. Just in time for PowerPoint to crash, but we're here to wrap it up. So we've covered a lot today. So let's bring it together with our 4 key takeaways. So the first is it takes a village. Accessibility can't be done alone or by one person or one team. Success comes from a collective effort across studios, central orgs, and the community. Our next key takeaway is accessibility in games requires constant trust. This is a partnership. So you need to build trust through transparency, clear boundaries, and empathy. Our next point is no 2 games are made the same. Adapt accordingly. Meet game teams to where they are and adjust your strategies from there. Lastly, and certainly not least, the accessibility in games requires nothing about us without us. Community voices are essential, and lived experiences can't be replaced by standards alone. So we need to have co-design sessions and direct involvement throughout production. A closing message then for you is accessibility is a journey, not a destination. Celebration is very important, and you should be celebrating every single win, whether big or small. Like I said, even if it's just opening one more door, that's enough. Together, we can make games more inclusive, more enjoyable for everyone. So, thank you then for your time and attention. I'll now be watching the Discord channel for any questions. I'm MomoXMia on all socials, and you can find me on LinkedIn too under Morgan Baker. Thanks again for having us for this GA conference, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of the event.